Let's cut to the chase, have an honest conversation, and develop real answers. As a matter of fact, with Andrew Cuomo. Hello, and welcome back to As a Matter of Fact. I'm Andrew Cuomo. You know, in life, we all make mistakes. That happens. But we try to learn from them, and we try not to make the same mistake twice. We all know that right now, government is mishandling the migrant crisis, and that it is a serious issue and it is only getting worse. To me, it is frighteningly reminiscent of the mishandling of the homeless crisis in the early 1980s. This is when homeless families first exploded onto the scene. And at the time, it was a relatively new phenomenon. Now, there had always been people who were homeless, but they were usually men. These were quote-unquote homeless families, which were primarily young women and children, and they were increasing dramatically. They were appearing in big cities all across the country, but especially here in New York City. Mayor Koch was mayor at the time, and he had to face this apparently novel development. The assumption was that many of these families would find a place to return to, that this was a short-term problem, and that it would be satisfied by using hotels and motels and temporary shelters. The operating theory, unspoken, was that on their own, these homeless families would rather find a permanent place to live and they would find a place to go. But they didn't. And we literally created an industry of welfare hotels. Those words were never used before. These were substandard facilities, and they were ill-equipped to handle families for long periods of time. Some became notorious, such as the Hotel Martinique, which I visited as a young person. And I remember the squalor. I remember the smell of urine in the hallways. I remember looking into these hotel rooms and seeing a mess of wires, running hot plates and all these little devices because families were trying to live permanently in these small hotel rooms. The concentration of poverty, the concentration of people who had issues and substance abuse issues, and the overwhelming percentage of the population were young children that were exposed to this. The Hotel Martinique became a national symbol of failed urban policy. It actually motivated me to get involved on the issue, where I started a not-for-profit called Help that would do just that, find temporary shelter with services for people to get them out of these hotels like the Hotel Martinique. Compounding the problem, New York City was paying $36,000 per year for a hotel room. $36,000. With that amount of money, you could easily have financed the construction of permanent and affordable housing. And that was the premise of the not-for-profit I started, Help, which was for a lower amount of money, you could create a new facility and provide the services that the families needed to stabilize, and it would be a lower burden on the taxpayer. The migrant crisis today follows an eerily similar pattern. There is a false assumption that this is a short-term issue. It is not. Cities and states are going to be paying for these hotels and motels for a long, long time. It is misguided to think short-term facilities are going to be the answer. They're exploring school gymnasiums and jails and college dorms, upstate motels. These are all makeshift solutions. They are misdiagnosing the problem. There's nothing short-term here. The asylum seekers will be here legally pending an asylum hearing. Given the volume and backlog, a record-breaking 1.6 million cases, they are estimating it will take 2 to 3 years just to conduct the asylum hearings. And that number will probably increase. These short-term plans and accommodations will likely become the next generation of welfare hotels. We must also recognize, on top of this, you have the cost of feeding and clothing and educating and providing health care. And remember, these are young people. We effectively have 2 million new residents in this country. It is a massive undertaking. And not only is government misguided in assessing the scope of the problem, but we have compounded it by placing this massive burden on our nation's cities. And our cities are least capable of managing the problem. They are already in the midst of an urban crisis with crime and homelessness and mental health issues and high taxation and commercial vacancies and post-COVID remote work options. Cities are already being depopulated. To add this critical responsibility can literally be the straw that breaks the city's back. And there is no constitutional or rational basis for municipal jurisdictions, for mayors to be responsible for immigration issues. Mayor Adams is right. He's been put in an impossible situation. And many states have abrogated their responsibility. Why? Because they're fearful of the negative NIMBY politics, which is how this issue has been presented. The migrants are a problem. They are an expensive problem to be dealt with. And with that as the interpretation, local counties are now passing emergency orders prohibiting hotels from accepting migrants from New York City. And it's happening across the country. Technically, this violates the state constitutional authority. But then the state must act. And the state must make the statement and the action that overrides these localities from prohibiting migrants from entering. But this is not just a problem. This really is a challenge. And there is a positive that can be made from this challenge. We need more low-wage workers. This could be an economic boom. This is really raising the issue that we need more affordable housing, because even once these migrants get jobs and start working, when and where are they going to find a place where they can afford the rent? Affordable housing has been a problem for decades, but this can be a moment where we now recognize it. The state must take more leadership, because New York City or Los Angeles or Chicago cannot do this on their own. They should fairly and proportionately manage the population across the state. Smaller communities within the state could actually benefit from the migrants' economic activity and workforce. There has to be a plan, and there has to be leadership, and the federal government is primarily responsible. They should start by finding short-term suitable locations from their own assets. They should start by working with the states to find short-term accommodations, but you cannot concentrate this problem in the cities. The federal government must also fund the state and local governments for the cost of the short-term accommodations, and more importantly, let the federal government say, we're going to use this moment to attack the affordable housing crisis, and let them fund the creation of affordable housing at a scale that this nation requires. The backlog demand for affordable housing stretches years. Public housing authorities should now modernize and professionalize. They have available land. They have an existing federal program. You can use Section 8 and tax credit programs to spur private market development. But creating more affordable housing will release pressure on the system and create more vacancies. Tackling affordable housing, we can also use this moment to attack the problem of commercial vacancies that these cities are going to have for a long time. How do we convert commercial space in urban areas into residential units? Challenging? Yes, but doable? Certainly. Another priority, accelerate the migrant population's constructive entrance into the workforce. Months of delay will cost billions here. Asking migrants and their families to stay in motel rooms for months and effectively sit on their bed and entertain their children in a motel filled with other migrants. This is not going to work, clearly. Let's organize the business leaders and bring them in and bring them to the table and say, we have an immediately available low-wage workforce that many businesses have been crying for. Let's coordinate those businesses with not-for-profit organizations that can help expedite the migrants' transition into the workforce. Language training, job skill training. This is all doable. Never waste a crisis. This is an opportunity. The silver lining is that this is an opportunity for the nation to organize and mobilize and welcome a population of new Americans eager to work at the minimum wage jobs that this economy vitally requires. Yes, government will have to step up. Yes, it's about real leadership. But if not now, when? 40 years after the homeless family crisis began, we still have families in short-term hotels and motels. Those that don't learn from the past are destined to repeat it.